I was thinking this morning at some point, I was thinking, I feel like music is like the other vocabulary that is going to help enrichen the planet in terms of waking up humanity. It's like the next stage in our existence is to um, invite the full capability we all have, whether we're doing it or just receiving, enjoying. It's like a language that can go past the drama of the planet.
Hello and welcome to Musicians Roundtable. I'm Jeffrey Goodman. Hello, Lin. How are you doing today?
Hi, very good.
Great. So can you introduce us a little bit to some of the work that you do, meditation, trance, and healing, and so forth?
As it relates to music or just in general?
Just in general first, and then we'll segue into some of the music aspects for sure.
Okay. First of all, I think that everybody's psychic. They just don't know it generally. It's part of our mind that is just as important as the intellectual side. And when coupled with the heart, with more compassion, it opens the window on a broader perspective of reality. So we absolutely live in a multi-dimensional universe, but our normal consciousness is limited to our physical senses, and we are so much more than that. So that's my key interest, is helping people to touch that deeper space that is within everybody. It's not just for a select few or special people. It's there in everybody. And perhaps the most easy way to see that is the children. When they're born, they're coming in with full consciousness, so they don't have the verbal skills to communicate verbally. They still communicate if we're at all sensitive to what they're trying to tell us. So it's a very natural part of our consciousness and has been around throughout history. When I think of noted composers such as Tchaikovsky, he once wrote about how he creates music. He wakes up in the middle of the night and it's all in his head, and he gets up and writes it down. And that's that, to me, that's an altered state of consciousness showing up in a conscious way that he can make use of it. Not everybody is gifted with such powerful dreams, but the intuitive side is multifunctional. It will work in anything somebody's interested in. Somebody's interested in athletics, it'll work there. Business there, politics there, rearing children there. It's just part of our awareness that we can expand, and we can certainly train it into better function.
Mm-hmm. So how do you use music in your teaching or in various aspects of your work?
The thing with music, I feel like, is a universal language, and it kind of bypasses the conscious intellectual side of the mind, which is often like a strong filter to try to filter out things and recatalog. And we think we understand them because we've cataloged them, but the intuitive mind knows directly, and music can touch that space in us. Music could be used for all kinds of purposes, but from my point of view, the most amazing use of music is often in the back of a meditational process. It helps the meditation go deeper.
So in the field of what I do, which is classical guitar, music, teaching, composing, and so forth, over a very long time, I found that people are rarely limited by lack of physical ability. Most people are more limited by things that come about in the mind, self-limitations that are imposed by the mind. And that limits people more than just the sheer ability to hear well, to imagine sound, and to physically play it on an instrument, whether it be guitar or another instrument. And in that respect, one of the things that I know that you speak about often is the idea of the outer mind and the inner mind. The outer mind and the ego functioning, and the inner mind that is perhaps a doorway to creativity. Could you discuss the outer mind and the inner mind a bit?
Yeah, I think this is key to our happiness, that we're not going to be happy if we're just limited to the outer part of the mind, because it just doesn't have a big enough picture. So the inner mind is that intuitive space that I was speaking about, and it has multiple dimensions, but basically there is a space within us that is loaded with joy. There's a place within us all that has kind of a direct perception of the universe. And we don't believe that about ourselves. So we are caught in a sense of limitation. I like to think of the ego as a kind of construct. It's the personality mind. It has a job while we're in a physical body to take care of things that need to be taken care of. You don't walk across the street in front of a big truck, something like that. But the ego mind is constantly in comparison, contrast, competition, self-analysis, and always not happy with who we are, because it doesn't know who we are. The ego mind is built on fear. It's constructed in the sense of lack. It's not constructed in the sense of abundance. And to the ego, if we wake up in consciousness, it's very frightened. So music has a way of penetrating past that structure and helping us wake up more directly. It still depends on our desire. If we want to wake up, that helps. If we don't want to wake up, the ego has tremendous tenacity to hang on for dear life and not let us wake up. But again, music can penetrate through that tenacity, through that barrier. So it's a universal language and has the potential to help recreate our awareness of who we are. So in teaching music, you're actually, from what I can hear what you're saying, you're helping the person wake up to more of their true nature.
I think that with that in mind, whether we are coming from a day full of busy activities or coming to a music lesson or teaching a music lesson, so often we come with the full stream of all the distractions and all the wild stuff that goes on in all of our lives. And
Yeah.
then we sit down with our instrument, in my case, the classical guitar, and we wish to become creative artists and find the experience of learning the instrument and playing the instrument to lead us into these very joyous states that music certainly brings to so many. So one of the things that perhaps you can help us with today, we can take a very pragmatic approach for now as we go a little further into our discussion, is to begin practice instead of sitting down and suddenly playing a scale or piece by Bach or so forth. Instead of beginning right away, perhaps you could show us a brief meditation that when we sit down, what we may do, and then from that meditation proceed to approaching some aspects of musical practice and relating it to music. So this would be a kind of an initial meditation for a few moments before beginning to play. Is that something that we can look at together?
Yeah, before we start with a meditation text, which is, I'll read, and I'd like to comment on the fact that most of the time we have difficulty feeling a real sense of self-worth. And so our limited ability to meditate seems to stand in the way because somehow we think we're not worthy of that space. But if you go into meditation, and it's like a meditation and prayer are like two sides of the same coin. So the words that a person uses would have to feel comfortable to them. But if I was a Buddhist, I wouldn't be thinking of God in the old-fashioned classic sense of a man in heaven. I might be thinking more of a universal energy. If I was a Hindu, more of that type of thing. If I'm a Christian, I might have a deep sense of the mystical side of Christianity. Those things are individual, but there is a space in meditation that can become universal. And that's the quality that, starting with, first of all, breathing with the breath, very simple. Just start with your breath and notice the inhale and the exhale. And then at some point, allow that inhale to be an inhaling of light as well as air and oxygen. And rest in that for a minute, 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. It can be very quick once you've practiced meditation for a while to go to that space. Okay, that's more on the physical body side. And then if you can, if there's some music you like that you're not going to analyze to death, you're going to listen to it without analysis in the background, that can help. That would be optimal. But you could sit down in a quiet space in a busy office as though you're having a cup of water or something and take 2 or 3 minutes and meditate. So it can be done almost under any circumstances. But that breathing in is a kind of tricking your personality to move out of the ego and drop all the stuff of the day. Drop the news, the gossip, the competition, and let it go. And with that, then some people can benefit from a guidance. Somebody else's words might help them. But actually, what's really going on, if there's a deep meditation space, it comes from a kind of timeless place within us. And that timeless place is always there. We just have to kind of let go of the ego's dispensation toward drama. And let go of the idea, am I going to meditate right? Am I doing the right technique? It's like, is there a good way to fall off a log? Just fall off the log into the water. Don't worry about to the left or to the right or something. So, yeah. There's so many meditation techniques, but I think the simpler the better. That's my approach to things. So
Good. So are we ready then perhaps to bring up a short meditation text that you can guide us through?
Yeah, I can do that. It just, but this would be a jumping off place. And a person, whatever they find that touches that space. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention something. What I wanted to jump to beyond that initial breathing is if you feel there's some place that needs some energy. It might be another person, it might be a physical health condition, it might be an emotional situation, it might be a job environment. Just take a minute or so and send love to that process and invite the universe to amplify the love, because it's not so much from our self ego-wise, it's from a place that is more universal. And you let that love flow and know somehow it's going to be received in the way that serves the other person or the other situation best. And you don't know what the details are, you don't need to know. You're not trying to say, okay, there's a broken arm, it has to be healed. No, you send the energy to the higher self of that person and let the higher self support the energy in whatever way is best. And it may show up immediately, or it just may speed up the healing over from a month's time. It might take 2 weeks instead or something. It will make a difference. And the key in that is you let go of all the attachment to it. You're just sending love. And that's a beautiful place to jump then to your personal meditation. So it's a win-win all the way around. Okay, so you want me to...
I will bring up the text so everyone can look at it. And then when it's posted, if you could then guide us through it. So here it comes in just a moment. Bear with me while I get it together.
Okay, let's start with just breathing. A couple deep breaths. And then let the breath regulate itself. And notice the inhale and the exhale. And then on the inhale, begin to allow that light can flow into the chest and gently start filling up the center of the chest with more light. And over a point, that light will expand. After a time, when it feels very full, on the exhale, let it flow out to every cell in the body. And then with this guided meditation from the text of the book,
visualize the energy within you, reaching deep into the earth and also into the heavens. 2 things to ask for: that you might feel your own guidance very clear and deep in those things that are important, and that you might witness and be more present with the conscious mind, making contact with the deeper mind. Let the mind begin to let the energy flow around the room, from the left to the right, as waves moving. Also ask to feel the presence of one of your teachers gently coming to be with you. Know that you are guided. Life is your lover. The heart of happiness dwells within you.
Thanks, Lin. That was really an amazing experience just to go through the guided meditation. Can you offer a few words to people who might be doing this for the first time or are truly novices with meditation as to what kind of follow-up they may do, both right after the meditation and also later on as they return to meditating in more frequent fashion?
well, in a workshop environment, when we've done a meditation, I almost always try to have people take a minute or 2 out of meditation, but not to start talking. So their mind is slowly drifting back to so-called 3-dimensional reality, and to, if possible, note what they experienced in the meditation. And if you're doing it on your own, I would even suggest perhaps to write it down, because what we're trying to do is capture those deeper parts of the mind and bring it forward to the conscious mind. Often people have a very deep experience in meditation, and then the conscious mind wants to put it aside as if nothing happened. And if we train ourselves to capture the deeper level of the mind and bring it into the conscious mind, we jump ahead quickly in our process. It's very significant change can start to take place when we trust what our inner self reveals.
Okay, that's very, very helpful. Now, another aspect that people who are studying music, classical guitar in the instance of my students and many others who may be viewing this at some point, we all think of, we have a teacher, we go to a lesson maybe once a week, or there's a group class, or less frequently. Some people take lessons only periodically. And we think of the teacher as being outside of ourself, the class being outside of ourself. But one of the concepts that I've experienced through your work is the idea of the inner teachers. And can you give a brief introduction to that?
It could be about 5 volumes on that alone. But I think that we're dimensionally aware of a very small part of our consciousness. And our 5 physical senses create the strong sense of isolation, that I'm this person, I'm this body. But on a deeper level, our mind reaches a place of consciousness that we might call divine or universal. And in that process of going deeper, it's very normal to encounter a sense of spiritual teachers that assist us. You can look at it as this is part of my consciousness, an inner teacher as part of my consciousness, or you can actually look at it as individual spiritual beings that assist us in whatever we're deeply interested in. And I hold both views simultaneously. I think that if we were mystically awake, we would realize we're connected to everything. But most of us aren't there. So along the way, we run into the awareness of spiritual teachers helping us. And they will help us in whatever way we're interested in life. Spiritually speaking, we want to wake up in consciousness. And if someone's involved with music, that's a very powerful part of our experience to wake up. And I think that anybody that gets dedicated toward their musical exploration will find they have an awareness of deep meditation spaces, and they're not alone in that. They might connect with other teachers, and when they're playing, when they're practicing, they may find their mind opens. They go into a quiet zone that suddenly they can do things with technical skill that they didn't know they had. And I think teachers assist in that process. They're not pulling strings like a puppet. We're definitely able to maintain our consciousness through this process, but I can't imagine life being lived with just the thought that I'm all alone. That would be so boring.
Well, when you're discussing it in this way, it brings to mind a small quotation from your book, Divine Chuckles, Life from a Higher Perspective, in which, as you discuss inner teachers, you say, again, it is not so much a matter of tuning into teachers as such. It is a matter of going to the depth of your own being, and they will honor your vibrational pattern by sharing with you the same vibration they carry. So it is a joint process always in a very deep way. And I particularly like the idea of the joint process.
Yeah, it's true.
Now, so I think that it's very hard for instance, for me to have any very direct sense of what you discuss about the inner teachers. But I do believe that everyone who has played an instrument has a wonderful experience that's quite common, and that is one practices and works on a certain problem or an issue or a passage, and then leaves it and it's not solved. But the next time we may sit down to play, it's completely solved. It's
Yep.
ready to go.
Yeah.
And I believe that, excuse me, that we can look at that in a whole variety of ways. Inner teachers is one way. Another way that I've used very often, and I'm going to share it with you in a moment, is the idea as a teacher that when we play a musical instrument, we use a whole variety of aspects of ourself, mentally, physically, and neurologically, that all come together to make music and the practice of music. And here is a diagram which I call the 3 sensory domains of music activity. And I'm going to bring it to share it, and then we'll have a brief discussion about it.
Okay.
Okay, so at the apex of the pyramid, we have sound, listening, and hearing. And just hearing a noise is not inner listening. Musical sound comes from the psyche. It's not something that's that exists purely on an external way as a sound wave. So everything that we do in music is centered in this. Now, when we play an instrument, we always are using our tactile sense, the feeling of the body, the breath, the hands moving, and so forth. And that physical awareness is absolutely integral to all that we do. We build up huge reservoirs of memories that involve integrating, imagining sounds, and then physically making them come into reality with the instrument. And then the third aspect I call the visual sense, having to do with music notation. And in our visual sense, what we see is essential for learning music notation, and it's also an important means to observe how others play their instrument. Of course, I have to say that the visual sense is not necessary. There have been some of the great musicians of the world have been blind. They don't have a physical visual sense.
Right.
But it is interesting that Braille, music notation in the form of Braille, was developed by Louis Braille, who was a musician, and he wanted to be able to notate music with it. And that's how it first began, I'm told.
Hmm.
Okay.
But I totally agree that our 5 physical senses can be extended as our depth of meditation and other processes open up. It extends those 5 physical senses so they become more acute. And from my point of view, they become more integrated with our true nature. So everything you're saying around music, I think, is a very clear and precise way to see how that interest makes you become more aware of how these processes function.
I think that as a performer, when I was doing that a long time ago, that very much is something you can experience, because for me, when I would perform, I would have, for the first few minutes of playing, I'd have this enormous sense of self-consciousness, and there would be a lot of like an adrenaline rush, and you're just at a point of where you must go right into the music very deeply. And I found that adrenaline, instead of wishing that it didn't take place, that adrenaline rush, that my sense of hearing would amplify tremendously, and I would hear better in a live performance than I ever could do in any rehearsal or in my private studio. So in that sense, really, the adrenaline itself is a fantastic ally of someone who plays, because then our body physiologically deepens our sense of hearing, and with that better hearing, you can do much more in the way of performing.
Yeah, I would add something to that. I think that the effect on the body is absolutely notable that when you're in a performance situation. But there's a deeper place in your consciousness, I believe, that invites the participation of inspiration, that we're not doing this just as our small personality self, that we're expanding into a dimension of reality that we all connect with. And the fact there's an audience here, they're connecting with that space and you're connecting with it. It's like a kind of spiritual channeling opening from my point of view, at least. But don't let the words get in the way. I think it's trying to find vocabulary for this is one thing, but the experience of inspiration is a very known and beautiful thing to tap into. And, yeah.
I think so. And in fact, there were times when I'd be performing where I feel that I somehow fell into that space of a bit of inspiration. And as a player, you can feel the audience connecting with you to the music and being in the presence of music. And that is a truly wonderful experience. I am sure that great performers that we know, whether it be on guitar, Segovia, Julian Bream, John Williams, or in piano, Arthur Rubinstein, Itzhak Perlman, and violin, that these players routinely go into these deep inspired spaces and bring that to the audiences shared in the live performance. And by the way, the live performance will always have elements that can never be recorded no matter what.
There's the energy.
Yeah. So regarding the inner listening that we referred to earlier, we're going to now do a presentation of what I call invoking inner listening. And in it, you're going to see and listen to how you may go about as a player invoking the inner listening so that when you begin your actual practice, that it may be deeper and more fruitful if you take a few moments to do this. So we're going to do that now. And then when that's presentation is finished, then we'll come back and have a little bit more discussion with Lin as we go on.
Good.
Before you start to play, it's often good to do something that I call invoking the inner listening. And all that means is to relax, listen deeply to your guitar, play a few simple notes, some beautiful sounds, and that helps to bring you into the state of mind where you're well connected to then get into your actual practice. So we'll begin by playing a couple of single notes, and this is how you do it. I'm going to begin by playing the high E in the 12th fret of the first string. I'm going to play it with a little bit of vibrato and expression, and I'm going to breathe slowly and listen to the note. This is the important thing. I'm going to listen deeply until the sound completely disappears. Here's the high E. I'll do a couple more notes. Here is the A on the second string, 10th fret. It's a very resonant note, and it's a beautiful note on almost every guitar. And then the third note I'll play is the A on the 7th fret of the 4th string. This is a powerful, long sustaining note, extremely beautiful on almost all of our guitars. Usually with just a few notes, you can bring yourself into a state of mind where you're really open to playing and all the beautiful sounds of the guitar. So that was single notes. Now let's move to playing a few very pretty chords. I'm just going to play a C major 7th chord in the first position. I'll strum it with my thumb, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to breathe slowly, listen to the sound until it completely dies away. Here's one more chord in the first position, an A major 7th chord, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to strum the chord and listen deeply to the sounds until they're completely gone away. Here is another chord, the F sharp half diminished 7th chord, well known from the Villalobos Prelude number 3, if you play that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remember to inhale, and then as I strum the chord with my thumb, I will exhale and follow the sound through to its completion. Here we go. And sometimes it's nice just to do a second time. I think I can have a more beautiful sound than that. Here we go. So invoking the inner listening can be done in really any way that pleases you. Here is another example. We're going to play a couple of arpeggios, and I'm just going to use the shape of an E major chord beginning up here at the 6th fret location. I'm going to play each of the 6 strings in an ascending arpeggio and let them sustain, and then I'm going to move descending to the first position. It's a lovely pattern, and it's very nice for invoking your inner listening. We've just used single notes, some chords, and some arpeggios with the idea of invoking inner listening. Try working with that. Find your own chords, single notes, and arpeggios, or whatever really captivates you. And you'll find that if you do that for a few moments before you start your regular practice, that it really, really enhances things, and your experience is deepened, and your results also will reflect that. One of the things that is really useful to discuss is this. And as a teacher, I've learned that more people are limited by their own inner self-doubts and lack of self-esteem than by, for example, the size of their hand, the quality of the guitar, external things that are necessary to make music. But it's really not that common to find someone who is the best, who finds the best that they can ever do, and then they get stuck there. People can always improve, always deepen, always expand their work, as long as they allow themselves to let go of inner limitations. And I'm wondering if you could reflect upon that for us a little bit and expand it from your perspective as how you think about those things.
I'd be happy to. We're just having a sudden thunderstorm. You might have noticed the change in the background sound. So much depends on the consciousness the person is in while they're playing and or listening. And if they're in a quiet zone within themselves, the quality will be enhanced. The process will be stronger. And the point of ourselves that we're always so self-conscious, we're self-critical, that has to slowly disappear more and more, hopefully. There was a TV program that had several people in friendly competition. And one of the guys had made a statement I thought was cutting edge. He said, well, he's a rock musician, but this was a program that they tried out all different forms of music and they all did well. He said, I have played so many times that I've gotten past performance anxiety. And he absolutely didn't have any performance anxiety. And I thought that was really cool because it is that space that you, through familiarity, you gain a place of being okay with yourself in whatever way you're performing. It would be like a school teacher that has been teaching for many years. The teaching process is never then a threatening environment. The pupils may not necessarily be listening well, but I think the key here is to understand that we're much more than we think we are, all of us. And we're also darn self-critical that it's ridiculous. And we're trying to move out of that paradigm. We're trying to make a paradigm shift in our consciousness. So we're okay with where we are. And we know there's always room for improvement. So the teacher is always a student. The student is always a teacher simultaneously. It's not that we have, the world's greatest authority on something. We're all capable of having a sense of how it feels to us. So we find our own brand of music. We find that may change over time, and we're allowing ourselves to grow, and that's what's important. If there's growth, then we're hooked. We enjoy it. If there's no growth, then it's static, and it's boring. It's not going to be fun.
I think that's very true. And so these are all things that people grapple with and encounter both as teachers, as players, as students, as performers. And it is an amazing process and adventure to be involved with. Something that I completely agree with what you said about the teacher being the student and the student the teacher. I think that every day in my own teaching that, for example, that as I review the lessons I may have given on a particular day, I will not be happy with myself if I haven't learned something about the music from the interaction and the collaboration with my student.
Yeah.
And it's always such a joy to make a discovery, even on there are pieces and exercises and elements of music that I've been close to my whole life, many, many decades of that. And yet, at a given moment, today, tomorrow, next week, I may be sitting down with a student and a whole new opening of understanding may come about just through the interaction. I would never have found that by myself.
Right.
In that collaboration with the teacher. It's such a wonderful thing. Yeah.
I completely agree. In the process of sharing energy with people in whatever form, I get so much from it myself. It's just amazing to feel the shift in consciousness that happens when you're stepping into the place where you give yourself permission to do something, to make a contribution, however that comes about. Something beautiful takes place. So, yep, I think it's a universal dynamic. It always works if we allow ourselves to step out of that intense self-criticism.
Well, that's something that we have to relearn every day. It's something moment by moment to constantly be involved, experiencing and opening and discovering. And for me, that I think we both see it from our own perspectives in a similar way with a similar root.
Yeah.
And so I want to thank you so much, Lin, for joining us today. It's been an amazing experience to look into these subjects with you. And for those of you who are listening, I will be posting links to Lin's website, to his book. And from there, we can all continue to explore. So again, thanks for joining us today. It's much appreciated.
Absolutely my privilege. Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey.